I took care of my grandma for 3 years, and my whole family turned on me when I asked for help. My name's Anna. I'm 35, single, and for the past 3 years, I've been taking care of my 95-year-old grandmother full-time. It wasn't something I planned for. It just happened. One stroke turned into two, then three, and before I knew it, the woman who used to make meatloaf every Sunday and drag me to church in heels 2 sizes too small couldn't even lift a spoon or remember which day it was. My grandma raised me. Not because my parents died or anything dramatic like that. My mom is very much alive and very much living in Florida with her second husband. But when I was 6, she dropped me off at grandma's, just for a little while, and never really came back. She'd show up every few years with a tan, some new stories, and a gift that usually still had the clearance tag on it. Grandma was the one who made sure I had clothes that fit and got to school on time and didn't grow up thinking Capri Sun was a food group. So when she had her second stroke and couldn't live alone anymore, I didn't even hesitate. I left my job, communications manager at a mid-sized firm in Denver, sublet my apartment, and moved into Grandma's old ranch-style house just outside of Boulder. I thought it would be temporary. A few months, tops. Maybe a year if things got worse. That was 3 years ago. I sleep on the living room couch now. Her room is the only one with a hospital bed, one of those massive electric ones that make a grinding noise every time I raise or lower her. There's a monitor that beeps whenever her heart rate drops too low, and another one that alerts me if she gets up, which, at this point, barely ever happens. She doesn't talk much anymore. Sometimes she'll open her eyes and just stare, not really at me, but through me, like she's stuck between this world and the next. Other times, she'll get this flash of clarity and call me Annie, which she hasn't done since I was 10. Those moments gut me more than the quiet ones. I haven't been on a date in 4 years. The last guy I was seeing, Greg, was actually someone I thought I might build a life with. We'd been together about 8 months when the first stroke happened. He tried to be supportive at first, but you could see the weight starting to wear on him. The missed dinners, the canceled plans, the fact that I was always tired, always stressed. One night after I forgot his birthday, completely forgot it, he told me I needed to choose between being his girlfriend or being a full-time nurse. And just like that, he was gone. My friends tried to stick around too. For the first year, they'd stop by with casseroles or bottles of wine, sit with me while Grandma napped, talk about work and relationships and all the things happening outside this house. Then the visits got fewer and further between. I don't blame them. It's hard to hang out with someone who can't leave the house and whose idea of a big night is a 10-minute walk to the mailbox if her joints aren't flaring up. Now I mostly talk to the pharmacist, the hospice nurse, and a grocery delivery guy named Devin who always calls me ma'am, even though I'm pretty sure we're the same age. Financially, it's been hell. I burned through my savings the first year. There's a small monthly stipend from the state, but it barely covers supplies. Diapers, Ensure, wipes, the specialized creams to keep her skin from breaking down. I tried to get paid as her caregiver through Medicaid, but the process is like running a marathon in molasses. So I freelance when I can. Writing copy, doing light editing, whatever's available. But I'm not gonna lie, some months I've had to choose between paying for her meds or paying the electric bill. My mom. She calls every few months, usually from an airport. Just checking in. How's Nana? Then she'll pivot to her latest yoga retreat or how her husband is thinking of retiring early. I've asked her for help maybe 3 times. Each time, she finds a way to turn it into something about how hard things were for her growing up. Last Christmas, I told her I was scared, that I felt like I was slowly drowning and nobody even noticed. She said I needed to focus on the blessings. Then she sent me a book on gratitude. No check, no plane ticket, just a hardcover reminder that I should smile more. I don't think I've had a full night's sleep since 2022. Even when Grandma sleeps through the night, I don't. I lie there listening for her breathing, panicking if it's too quiet, jolting awake if I hear a cough. My back is wrecked from lifting her. I've had recurring chest pains that I'm sure are stress-related, but I can't afford to get them checked out. And I'm tired. I'm so goddamn tired. But here's the thing. Sometimes I catch her watching me. Her hand will twitch toward mine, and she'll squeeze, just a little. And in that squeeze is everything. It's, thank you, and I'm scared, and I'm still here, all at once. And on those days, it feels almost worth it. Almost. So yeah, that's where I'm at. 35. No job, no partner, no real friends left. But I've kept the woman who raised me alive, comfortable, and with as much dignity as I can manage. I don't know how long this will last, but I do know that when it ends, I won't regret a second of it, even if the cost was everything else. I've already talked about how I became the sole caregiver for my 95-year-old grandmother. What I didn't get into yet is the rest of my family, or more specifically, how they managed to disappear the second things got hard. My mom lives 12 minutes away. 12. Not across the country, not in another time zone, not even across town. She's in this same neighborhood, in a tidy little condo she got after her third divorce. And yet somehow, in the 3 years I've been taking care of Grandma, she's managed to come over exactly 7 times. I know because I kept track at first. I wrote it down in a little notebook next to Grandma's medical log, partly out of spite and partly because I genuinely thought maybe I was just misremembering. But no, 7 times. Twice for Thanksgiving, once to drop off a set of sheets I didn't ask for, and 4 other brief pop-ins that lasted less than 15 minutes. I confronted her about it once. Not even aggressively, just a, hey, could you maybe come by this week? I have to take Grandma to a neurology follow-up, and I could use a second pair of hands. She looked at me like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. You're the one who decided to move in, Anna, she said, as if I'd packed up my life and gave up my job for fun. You always had such a soft spot for your grandmother. This is your path. My path. Like I was Moses descending from the mountain with a nurse's aide certification and a pack of adult diapers. What really gets me is the way she talks about Grandma to other people. I've overheard her on the phone with my aunt, cooing about how Nana is such a trooper, and we're just so blessed to still have her. Meanwhile, she wouldn't even know what prescriptions Grandma's on if I handed her the pill bottles and a cheat sheet. And then there's the rest of the family. A rotating cast of cousins, great-nieces, nephews, and the occasional second cousin once removed, all of whom show up with the same fake smile and the same thinly veiled question. Has she made any changes to the will? They don't even try to hide it anymore. One of my mom's cousins, Lori, came by last spring for what she called a catch-up visit. She brought a sad little box of pastries from a gas station and spent most of the time walking around the house, touching the china, asking where the antique clocks went, and mentioning how much she always loved Grandma's jewelry collection. I finally had to shut her down when she asked, totally casually, if I thought the property value had gone up. I don't know, Lori, I said. Haven't had time to call a realtor between the diaper changes. She blinked like I'd slapped her, muttered something about having a lunch reservation, and left without saying goodbye to Grandma. What none of them seem to understand, or maybe what they just don't care about, is that Grandma isn't some dusty asset waiting to be divided. She's a human being who still gets scared when the lights flicker during a storm, who cries sometimes when I brush her hair, not because it hurts, but because she remembers when she used to do mine, who calls me Mom more and more often because her mind is eating itself piece by piece, and I'm the only steady thing left in her shrinking world. My Uncle Rick, my mom's older brother, came by exactly once. It was early on, maybe a month after the 3rd stroke. He brought a bottle of wine I couldn't drink and a stack of paperwork he wanted Grandma to sign. Said it was just to simplify things in case anything happened suddenly. I told him to get out before I called the police. Haven't heard from him since. But he sends emails. Oh, he sends so many emails. Passive-aggressive check-ins like, hope Nana's still hanging in there. Would love to touch base about the estate planning stuff before tax season. As if I'm going to pause changing a bedpan to scan him copies of a will he's not even in. The worst is when they try to make it sound like they're doing me a favor by staying out of it. We don't want to crowd you. My cousin Jenna said on the one Zoom call I made the mistake of joining. You've just got such a nurturing energy, and I think it's beautiful that you're taking this on. Taking this on. Like it's a yoga class. Like it's optional. They say this crap and then post on Facebook about the strength of family and how much they miss Nana, with a photo they probably haven't updated since 2012. Meanwhile, I'm spoon-feeding applesauce to a woman who used to teach piano to half the neighborhood and now can't remember her own name on most days. What kills me is how performative it all is. They want the image of being caring relatives. They want the legacy, the heirlooms, maybe even the house. But none of them want the work. None of them want the midnight bathroom trips, or the bed sores, or the smell that clings to your clothes even after you shower. None of them want to watch a strong, proud woman forget how to swallow. They just want to show up at the funeral with a nice bouquet and a black dress that makes them look appropriately somber in the pictures. And God help me, I don't know what I'll do when that day comes. Because once Grandma's gone, all that's left is me. Just me. With 3 years of silence and exhaustion and fading into the background, while the people who never lifted a finger gather around the casket like they were part of something. But I was here. Every day. Every goddamn day. And they weren't. By this point, I'd been caring for Grandma for almost 3 years. 3 years of sleepless nights, sponge baths, bed alarms, and the kind of quiet that gets under your skin and stays there. I was burnt out. Broke. Running on instant coffee and the thin hope that maybe, just maybe, someone in this family would start acting like Grandma mattered to them beyond what she might leave behind. Then my Aunt Teresa died. She was my mom's older sister. Lived alone in a small brick bungalow on the east side of town. Never married, no kids. She'd been sick for a while, but it still came as a shock. She went into the hospital with pneumonia and didn't come out. I cried, of course. I loved her. She used to take me to the museum when I was little, let me eat popcorn in her car, never scolded me for talking too much. But I also knew what that house meant. And not in the way the rest of the family did. It had a ramp already installed out front because of her arthritis. A walk-in tub in the bathroom. Wide doorways. No stairs. Quiet street. Close to a grocery store, a pharmacy, a park where I could maybe sit for 5 minutes while Grandma dozed. I'd walked through that house dozens of times growing up, and when I closed my eyes, I could already see where I'd put Grandma's hospital bed, where the feeding supplies could go, where I could maybe, finally, sleep in a real bed again. So I asked, at the wake, after everyone had finished saying the usual things, "She looks peaceful, she loved you so much, so sudden." I waited until the family was gathered at my cousin Lisa's place for coffee and casseroles. I stood in the kitchen, heart pounding harder than it should have, and said, "I'd like to talk about Aunt Teresa's house." Everyone turned. I tried to sound calm, reasonable, like I'd rehearsed 100 times. I've been taking care of Grandma in a house that doesn't meet her needs. It's small, it's old, it's hard to navigate. If I could move her to Teresa's place, I could give her better care. There's space. Accessibility. It would make things easier. For her. For me. Dead silence. Then Rick, my mom's brother, snorted and said, "So you're calling dibs now? Real classy, Anna." I blinked. It's not about me. I'm not asking to own it. I just want to live there with Grandma, to take care of her more safely. My mom, who'd been staring into her coffee mug like it held the meaning of life, finally spoke up. "You always find a way to make everything about you." My jaw actually dropped. I've given up my job, my apartment, my entire life to take care of Grandma. And you think this is about me? Jenna, who hadn't visited in over a year but still managed to post throwbacks of her and Grandma like they were best friends, chimed in. "It just feels opportunistic. She's not even buried yet, and you're already talking about real estate." "She didn't have a will," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And none of you were planning to live there. You said it yourselves. Too far from work, not enough bedrooms, bad school district." "That doesn't mean you get to claim it," Rick snapped. "What? You think we're just going to hand it over?" I wasn't asking for it to be handed over. I said I'd cover the utilities, taxes, whatever needed to be paid. I even offered to buy them out of their imaginary shares if they really felt like I was stealing something from them. But it didn't matter. The second I asked for something that would actually make caregiving sustainable, it became a referendum on my character. Selfish. That word got thrown around a lot. You're being selfish. You're making this about money. You're trying to take advantage of the situation. Meanwhile, I'd been changing Grandma's diapers for 3 years while they posted "Cherish Your Elders" memes from brunch. Eventually I left. I couldn't sit there while people who hadn't lifted a finger judged me for wanting a house that might finally give Grandma the peace she deserved. I cried the whole way home, and then I cried some more when I saw her lying in bed, thin and pale, watching the ceiling like she was waiting to be lifted off the earth. I still live in the same house. Still sleep on the couch. Still bathe her with water I warm on the stove because the heater's busted and I can't afford a plumber. And Teresa's house? Sitting empty. Windows closed. Mail piling up. A "for sale by owner" sign went up last month, taped crookedly to the front door like an afterthought. Nobody moved in. Nobody fixed it up. Nobody made it into a safe, soft place for an old woman to spend her final days. Because that would require work, compassion, sacrifice. Things I guess I'm the only one in this family willing to give. I don't even know what day it was. Tuesday? Sunday? Doesn't matter. Time blends when your life is measured in medication charts, feeding schedules, and the quiet panic of what if today is the day she doesn't wake up. I remember standing in the kitchen trying to open a jar of applesauce with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. My shoulders hurt from pushing the wheelchair all morning. My eyes burned from sleep I hadn't had. And somewhere in the back of my head, I could still hear my mother's voice from the last phone call. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. If you didn't have such a martyr complex, maybe people would help you." A martyr complex. That's what she called it. Like I'm doing all this to prove something. Like this is some long-winded performance just to make them feel guilty. As if I haven't begged for help. Pleaded. Screamed into the void while holding a bedpan and wondering if I remembered to eat that day. As if I'm not slowly breaking into 100 sharp little pieces while trying to keep one human being from slipping away in silence. I don't remember when I started crying, but I remember the applesauce hitting the floor. The sound of the glass jar shattering. The sticky mess spreading across the tile while I just stood there with both hands clenched and no idea what to do next. There are days I feel like a ghost in my own life. I forget what I look like in decent lighting. My hair stays in a bun that's half falling out. My clothes are old, stained, stretched in places that shouldn't stretch. The only makeup I own is gathering dust in a drawer next to a curling iron I haven't touched in 2 years. I used to wear earrings. I used to care. The worst part is not just the exhaustion. It's the way the people who should know better treat you like you're doing it wrong. Like if you were just a little more organized or a little less emotional, this would be easy. Like you're failing, somehow, at being both a nurse and a granddaughter and a therapist and a cook and a housekeeper all at once. They come around once every few months and marvel at how well she's holding up. Then they look at me and say things like, "You look tired. Maybe you should rest." Like I haven't been trying to do that since 2021. I've lost count of the nights I've fallen asleep sitting up, the mornings I've woken up to a monitor beeping and stumbled into her room on adrenaline alone. I've pulled a muscle in my back from lifting her wrong. I've sat on the bathroom floor at 2 in the morning because the smell of medication and bodily fluids made me so nauseous I couldn't stand up. But sure, I've got a martyr complex. And yet, somehow, not everyone is like that. There's a barista named Cam at the little coffee shop 3 blocks over. He sees me maybe twice a month, when I can justify the $5 splurge. He always remembers my order, always slips me an extra cookie or a note on the lid that says, "You're doing great." We've never talked about Grandma. I think he just knows. There's a look some of us have, a kind of quiet weight that hangs off the shoulders. My friend Malika from college texts me once a week without fail. "Just a thinking of you." Or "Tell Grandma I said hi." Even though they've never met. One time she mailed me a gift card to Target with a sticky note that said, "For the things you forget you need." I stood in the kitchen and cried for 10 minutes holding that damn card. Not because it was a lot, because someone saw me. Even the hospice nurse, Sharon, who comes once every other week, always takes an extra 5 minutes to ask how I'm holding up. Not Grandmommy. She looks me in the eye, puts a hand on my shoulder, and says, "You're doing the impossible." And for a moment, I believe her. Because it is impossible. It's impossible to be everything to someone and nothing to everyone else. To keep pushing through days where the only sound is the oxygen machine and your own thoughts. To get up each morning knowing you'll end the day more tired, more invisible, more behind on the bills. It's impossible. And yet I'm still here. I have moments where I think about walking out. Just putting on shoes, grabbing my wallet, and leaving. But then I remember the way Grandma's fingers twitch when I hold her hand. The way she whispers, "Thank you," on the good days, like it costs her something to say it. And I remember why I stay. It's not for the Facebook praise. It's not for recognition or gold stars or applause from relatives who never show up. It's because she showed up for me. Every day of my childhood. Every scraped knee. Every bad dream. Every science fair project and broken heart. She was there. And now it's my turn. Even if no one else understands. Even if the ones who should care the most are the loudest critics. Even if I'm tired in ways I can't put into words. I'm still here. Somewhere around the 2.5-year mark, I realized I was drowning. Not just emotionally, not just physically, but financially and legally too. Grandma was still with me, but barely. Her body was giving out in slow motion. There were good days, but they were getting shorter, and the hard days were getting longer. I had run out of savings. I had debt stacked up in quiet little envelopes I hadn't opened in weeks. I was working 2 freelance contracts on the side, barely keeping the lights on, and every time someone in the family hinted that I was doing this for the inheritance, I felt like screaming. I started wondering if I was doing something wrong. If I had made a huge mistake by trying to take this all on alone. So I did something I probably should have done earlier, but better late than never. I called a lawyer. Not one of those billboard guys who promises to make your DUI disappear. I found a local elder care attorney through a friend of a friend. Her name was Marianne. She had soft eyes, practical shoes, and an office that smelled like printer ink and lemon disinfectant. I brought a folder filled with whatever documentation I had, medical records, receipts, notes scribbled on legal pads in the middle of the night. I sat across from her, trying to explain everything in a way that didn't sound like a nervous breakdown. I told her how I'd moved in after Grandma's 3rd stroke. How I gave up my apartment, my job, my life to become a full-time caregiver. How no one else in the family stepped in. How they didn't visit, didn't pay, didn't help. I told her about the nights with no sleep, the equipment I paid for out of pocket, the threats and insults I got from my own relatives when I asked for even the smallest amount of support. Marian listened. That alone was more than most people had done. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just took notes, nodded occasionally. And when I finally ran out of breath, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Anna, what you're doing is beyond admirable. It's work. It's labor. And in the eyes of the law, it has value." She pulled out a folder and showed me state statutes I'd never heard of. Caregiver compensation programs. Medicaid provisions. Clauses that, if applied, would entitle me to a formal agreement. An actual legal contract, compensating me for the care I'd provided. You're not just a granddaughter, she said. You're her de facto guardian. You're providing 24/7 skilled care, emotional support, household maintenance, and medical coordination. If she were in a facility, it would cost $6,000 to $8,000 a month. At the very least. I just sat there. I couldn't even process it. Not because I didn't believe her, but because no one had ever said that to me before. No one had ever validated it like that. Everyone else had made it sound like I should be doing more, giving more, sacrificing more. That wanting anything in return, money, recognition, help, was greedy or cold. But here was someone who looked at the facts, the paper trail, the sheer number of hours I'd poured into keeping this woman alive, and said it had worth. We went through the options. Marianne told me that if Grandma was mentally competent, which, at this point, was unlikely, we could formalize a caregiving contract retroactively and moving forward. If she wasn't, I could petition for guardianship and request back compensation, especially if I could prove that other family members had failed to act. There were forms to fill out, affidavits to sign, notarized statements. But there was a way. I asked her what she thought the family would say if I moved forward. She didn't flinch. They'll accuse you of being opportunistic. Of course they will. Because people like that always do. They don't want to face the fact that they let someone else do all the work. But that doesn't change what's fair. On the way home from her office, I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I would. I thought I'd pull over on the side of the road and sob the way I usually did after appointments. But I didn't. I felt something settle in me. Not peace, not quite, but something firmer. Like my spine remembered how to hold itself up. I sat on the edge of Grandma's bed that night while she slept, her face turned toward the window like she was dreaming of something better. I brushed her hair back from her forehead and thought about all the things I'd done for her without ever asking what I was owed. Because I didn't think I could ask. Because I thought love meant giving until there was nothing left. Now I knew better. It was still love. It was always love. But it was work, too. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel ashamed for wanting that to count. I scheduled the meeting for a Sunday afternoon, thinking it would be easier for everyone. No work, no excuses. I texted, called, even sent a group email, because I knew if I didn't make it foolproof, they'd claim they didn't know. I told them we'd meet at Grandma's house, where it all started and where it was still happening every single day, whether they showed up or not. I even cleaned. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed the space to look decent so they couldn't use the smell or the clutter as a reason to look away. They showed up late. Of course they did. One by one, trickling in like they were doing me a favor. Rick brought his usual scowl and a travel mug I knew had whiskey in it. My mother had sunglasses perched on her head, even though we were inside, and she was already on her second sigh by the time I asked everyone to take a seat. Lisa wore a blazer like we were in some kind of corporate mediation. Jenna kept fiddling with her phone, barely looking up. I stood in front of them, heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to escape. My palms were slick, but I didn't let it show. I had notes, bullet points, the lawyer's contact info printed out in a folder just in case things got hostile. I cleared my throat and started with the basics. I explained everything I had done. Not dramatically, not with tears, just facts. That I had left my job. That I had lived here for 3 years. That I paid for her medication, her food, her care supplies, her heating when the furnace gave out last winter. I told them about the lawyer. About the legal recognition I'd learned I was entitled to. About the compensation programs they had all ignored because no one else had cared enough to ask. I told them that this meeting wasn't about kicking anyone out or demanding money. It was about fairness. It was about acknowledgement. I'm asking you, I said, my voice steady, to recognize what I've done. To agree that if anything happens, if we have to make decisions about the estate or her care, that my role is not erased. That this hasn't all been for nothing. For a moment, no one said anything. It was that brittle kind of silence where you can already feel the tension climbing the walls. Then my mom scoffed. Oh, please, she said, flipping her sunglasses up onto her head like it gave her more moral authority. You act like you're the only one who's ever taken care of a parent. This is life, Anna. People take care of their elders. Rick nodded, arms crossed. You think just because you moved in, we owe you something? That we should bow down and thank you? Get over yourself. I'm not asking for a parade, I said tighter now. I'm asking for respect. For basic recognition. Lisa chimed in with that saccharine tone she always used when she wanted to sound rational, but was actually being condescending. We appreciate what you've done, but you made that choice. Nobody forced you. We all have lives too. I laughed. I actually laughed, which I think scared them more than yelling would have. You have lives. I have this house. These 4 walls. This smell. This schedule. This life that no one else wanted. I didn't choose this because it sounded fun. I chose it because someone had to. And I was the only one who didn't look away. Jenna finally looked up from her phone. So what? You want us to put it in writing? That you're the best granddaughter? That you did more than the rest of us? No, I said, voice flat. I want you to stop pretending like this never happened. I want it on record that I've been the one holding her life together while the rest of you posted throwbacks and forgot to call. But it didn't matter. They brushed me off. Said it was getting too emotional. Said they had plans. Said we could revisit this later. My mom stood up like it was over and announced she had a nail appointment. Rick mumbled something about getting back to his truck. Lisa said she'd circle back after thinking things through. And just like that, they were gone. They walked out like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just cracked myself open in front of them. I stood in the middle of the living room, the space still holding the shape of their absence, and I realized nothing had changed. They didn't want to see me. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. But I had done what I came to do. I had said it out loud. I had spoken the truth in front of people who tried to pretend it didn't exist. And I didn't need their permission anymore. I didn't plan to post anything. It just sort of happened. It was 2 a.m, the kind of hour where the world feels quiet and mean and a little too heavy, and I found myself scrolling through Reddit on my phone, reading threads from other people taking care of sick relatives. I don't even remember what post I commented on, but someone replied and said, "You should tell your story. You're not alone." So I did. I wrote it all out in one long, breathless stretch. I didn't hold back. I talked about how I'd been living with Grandma for 3 years, how I'd given up everything, how no one in my family helped, how they accused me of being greedy when I asked for access to a better space, how I consulted a lawyer and learned I was entitled to compensation, how I called a meeting and they looked at me like I was the villain. I wrote about how exhausted I was, how invisible I felt, how I just wanted someone, anyone, to say I wasn't crazy for feeling like I was being used. I hit post and went to bed, expecting maybe a few people to respond. I figured some would say I should tough it out, that this is what families do. I braced myself for backlash. But that's not what happened. I woke up to hundreds of comments, then thousands. Notifications pouring in faster than I could keep up. Messages from strangers across the country, even some outside of it, telling me they'd been through the same thing. People shared their stories about being the forgotten caregiver, the sibling who stayed, the grandchild who stepped up when no one else would. And over, one message repeated itself. You deserve better. They said I wasn't selfish, that what I was doing wasn't just noble, it was essential. That families love to romanticize caregiving until it comes time to actually do it. That my labor had value. That I had every right to ask for help, for fairness, for dignity. One woman sent me a breakdown of Medicaid caregiver programs in my state. A man who had cared for his father for 8 years told me how he had been reimbursed through a formal agreement that his lawyer helped him draft. Nurses chimed in with stories about watching people like me burn out, pushed to the brink while everyone else sat around and clapped themselves on the back for sending a Christmas card. Even the lawyers showed up. A few elder law attorneys sent me private messages offering advice, encouragement, even free consultation links. They told me to keep going, that my documentation mattered, that just because my family refused to see it didn't mean it wasn't real. And the kindness, the raw, unfiltered kindness, it wrecked me in the best way. People sent grocery gift cards. Someone offered to cover a heating bill. Another person who makes custom blankets emailed to ask if Grandma needed one. I sat there on the floor next to her bed, reading these messages out loud while she dozed, tears running down my face. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. For the first time, it felt like someone saw me. Not as a burden, not as the bitter relative or the over-invested caregiver, but as a person doing the work no one else would. As someone who mattered. I showed my mom the post. She rolled her eyes and said, "You're getting strangers to validate your victim complex now?" But I didn't even flinch. Because for once, her voice wasn't the only one in the room. I printed out some of the comments and pinned them to the fridge. Not for the family. They don't come here anyway. For me. For the days when I can't remember why I keep doing this. For the nights when the silence gets too loud. They remind me that what I'm doing is real. That it's hard. That it counts. And that I'm not crazy for wanting the people who should care most to at least say thank you. I didn't make the decision lightly. I sat with it for weeks, turning it over in my head like a sharp stone I wasn't ready to touch. I kept thinking maybe someone in the family would come around. Maybe, just maybe, they'd finally acknowledge what I'd done. But the calls never came. The apologies never arrived. And the for sale sign in front of Aunt Teresa's house was still there, like a reminder that they didn't just forget me, they erased me. So I called Marianne again, the lawyer. I told her I was ready. If they weren't going to recognize my part in this family by choice, then I would make them recognize it in court. She didn't sound surprised. Then let's get to work, she said. The first step was putting everything in order. Every scrap of paper, every receipt, every dated medical supply invoice, every grocery bill with Grandma's name on it, every pharmacy label I'd saved because I couldn't afford to buy the weekly pill sorters. I had boxes of notes from doctor appointments, scribbled with symptoms, medication changes, and next steps. I had messages printed from the family group chat where they ignored me, proof of no-show visits, and empty promises. Marianne told me to write a daily log from memory, even retroactively. We went month by month, year by year, building a timeline of care. She asked for photos. I sent her everything. Pictures of Grandma in the wheelchair I bought secondhand. Me changing the dressings on her pressure sores. A video from the day the lift system broke and I had to carry her down the hallway myself. I got statements from people who had seen what I'd been through. Sharon, the hospice nurse, wrote a letter detailing how consistent and thorough my care had been. Malika, my college friend, submitted screenshots of our weekly texts and a personal account of what she'd witnessed. Even Cam, the barista, agreed to testify if needed. She's in here with bags under her eyes and compression gloves on, he wrote. She's not doing this for attention. She's doing this because no one else would. We filed the petition in probate court, requesting formal acknowledgement of the caregiving agreement and fair compensation drawn from the estate. Not all of it, just my share. The part that reflected what I'd actually done. Marianne said we had a strong case, especially with the medical records and proof of financial contribution. Legally, my position was solid. Emotionally, I was wrecked. Because no matter how much paperwork I had, it still felt like betrayal. Not to them. They had already betrayed me. But to the idea of family I used to believe in. The idea that doing the right thing would matter more than who had the loudest voice or the most polished excuse. The family caught wind of it quickly. Rick called first. I didn't answer. Then came Lisa's email, passive-aggressive and dripping with fake concern. Is this really what you want to do? Air our family's business in public? My mother's voicemail was the one that stuck with me. I knew you were dramatic, Anna, but this? You're trying to tear us apart over money. No, I wasn't trying to tear anyone apart. I was trying to hold myself together. The morning we submitted the full documentation packet, I stood in the courthouse parking lot with a manila envelope pressed against my chest. My hands were shaking, not out of fear, out of relief, because I'd finally stopped waiting for them to do the right thing. I had done it for myself, for Grandma, and that was enough. It took almost a year. A full year of filings, hearings, depositions, and mediation sessions that went nowhere. I had to sit across from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months and listen to them lie under oath about how involved they were in Grandma's care. Lisa actually said she visited regularly and once coordinated home health services. Rick claimed he helped financially by covering occasional grocery costs, which turned out to be one time, 6 years ago, when he dropped off a case of off-brand bottled water and a rotisserie chicken. They brought their own attorney, a man in an expensive suit who kept referring to me as the live-in granddaughter, like I was some borderline squatter trying to scam a dying woman. Every time he said it, Marianne would lean forward, calm as anything, and say, "You mean the full-time caregiver, correct?" I sat in that courtroom through months of hearings while they picked apart my life. They questioned everything. Why I had stopped working. Why I hadn't filed for Medicaid sooner. Why I hadn't asked for help more aggressively. As if my exhaustion was evidence of incompetence. As if the fact that I hadn't abandoned Grandma made me suspicious. The worst part wasn't the insults. I could handle those. It was the way they spoke about her. Cold. Detached. Like she was a financial liability and nothing more. There was no grief, no guilt. Just numbers. Market value of the house. Appraisal on the jewelry. Division of assets. I sat there gripping the armrest, thinking about the way Grandma used to sing when she brushed my hair, and they sat there arguing over how much her furniture was worth. But the truth held. It stood up. The documents, the statements, the photos, the years of recorded care. The judge listened. He read through everything. He asked questions. And at the end, in a room so quiet you could hear someone shifting their coat in the back row, he ruled in my favor. The court formally recognized the caregiving agreement. I was awarded compensation for the years I spent taking care of Grandma. A portion of the inheritance was set aside for me, not as a gift, but as repayment for unpaid labor, essential services, and the preservation of her dignity in her final years. The remaining assets would be split among the others, minus what the court called a reasonable offset to reflect disproportionate contribution. They didn't take it well. Lisa stormed out of the courtroom. Rick muttered something under his breath that I didn't bother to catch. My mother wouldn't look at me at all, just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, her hands in her lap like if she didn't move. Maybe she wouldn't have to admit what had just happened. But I didn't care. Because it was over. Because someone had finally said, in an official record with a judge's signature and a courtroom seal, that what I did mattered. That it had value. That I wasn't selfish, or dramatic, or opportunistic. I was the one who stayed. And for once, that was enough. The check didn't come in some dramatic moment. No music swelling, No surprise knock at the door. It was just there in the mailbox one morning, folded inside a legal envelope, sterile and unceremonious like it wasn't the physical symbol of 3 years of my life. I opened it with trembling hands, sitting on the porch with a chipped mug of coffee in my lap, the sun barely warming the cracked concrete. The numbers weren't massive by lawsuit standards, but they were enough. Enough to clear the debt I had buried myself in. Enough to get the house repairs done. Enough to buy a proper hospital bed that didn't groan every time I adjusted her legs. Enough to exhale. I used the money like it mattered. I hired a part-time nurse to come in 3 days a week so I could take a nap or walk to the store or just sit alone in silence without watching the clock. I bought a new water heater and fixed the sink that had been dripping for months. I installed blackout curtains in the bedroom so Grandma could sleep easier. I replaced the sagging couch I had been sleeping on for almost 3 years with a real bed, just a modest one, tucked in the den, but it had a frame, a mattress, and sheets that didn't smell like old fabric softener and fatigue. I cried the first night I slept in it. More than the money, it was the shift inside me that I wasn't expecting. I didn't realize how much shame I'd been carrying until it was gone. How deeply the whispers of "you're being selfish" and "you just want attention" had lodged themselves into my spine. For so long I thought I had to prove my worth in silence, through sacrifice alone. I thought I had to endure without recognition, or else it didn't count. But I was wrong. Recognition didn't change the past. It didn't undo the sleepless nights or erase the times I sat on the bathroom floor sobbing quietly so she wouldn't hear. It didn't bring back the friendships I lost or the years I gave up. But it made something in me settle. Like I wasn't invisible anymore. My family didn't apologize. They didn't congratulate me. They didn't even speak to me after the ruling, except for one email from Lisa months later that said, "I hope you're satisfied." I didn't reply. I was done trying to make them understand. They had chosen not to see me, and I had chosen to stop asking for their permission to exist. Grandma's still here. Some days are better than others. She doesn't talk much anymore, but when I wheel her out onto the porch and the sun hits her face just right, she smiles. And that smile, soft and slow and flickering like the last light in a storm, tells me everything I need to know. I did right by her. That's what matters. And now I have the peace to sit with that truth without apology.